Now here with the Medal of Courage, Gary Chopp. You've spent some time wrestling in the great state of Michigan. So before we get to what you're here for, where in Michigan? So if you're in the mitten, where are we looking here?
We're looking at the western side of the state. That's where Grand Valley is located.
Okay.
Yeah, to the west of Grand Rapids. You may have heard of Grand Rapids. It's a pretty big town.
No Grand Rapids.
Okay, so this is west of Grand Rapids, 15 miles maybe.
So I know of Grand Valley State. I got into wrestling after the program was cut, but I know it from their time as a club program, the NCWA with the Headlock Cafe shirt. Some of us are familiar with Grand Valley then. There's some news brewing about them now, but I want to go back to your time wrestling growing up, and what was it that drew you to the sport of wrestling?
Just an accident, really. Yeah, we switched schools. We moved. My family, my parents and my four brothers and I, we moved from Milwaukee, Wisconsin to Lansing, Michigan, which is in the center of the state. And I had practiced, or I had been out for basketball for a couple years in the Milwaukee area, and I planned on doing the same thing outside of Lansing when we moved there, but it didn't work out because there was no transportation to the real basketball school that I really wanted to go to. So I ended up going to the local public high school, Grand Ledge High School, outside of Lansing, and I did not go out for football because we got back from our vacation late. So as an insecure freshman, I was just pretty disturbed by the whole thing. And when I was in my Latin class, and a couple of kids during a break were talking about what a good wrestling program Grand Ledge had, and especially our heavyweight, Tom Tucker, who everyone loved and who won all of his matches, and who was eventually a state champion for us. That sounded so exciting that I was drawn to the sport.
So it helped there was a winning team, and then when you get into a wrestling room, we like to joke that we're kind of creatures of habit. We're also gluttons for punishment. And what was it about the sport of wrestling, as a first-timer coming in there, that can be kind of almost defeating in a lot of ways? Like, it's not really a good self-esteem builder day one. So
right, Jason.
What was it like what drew you back?
Well, that's maybe that's the best part of the whole story is so I'm all fired up about this, going out for this sport wrestling at this big wrestling high school, and I started practicing with them, and these aren't even really the real good wrestlers because they're out playing football, so most of them. So I'm not even with like any first string or maybe second string. I'm there just with, the low-level people like me. And we weren't even wrestling live at the time. We were just going through drills. And I hated it so badly. Your body just aches with going through the drills and just being intimidated. I mean, we weren't even with good people. I mean, with the really good wrestlers, and I was intimidated by the guys who I was drilling with. And I wanted to quit so badly, but I didn't want to be called a quitter. And I made it through the whole season, and the coach came in one day and said, "Okay, all you freshmen, I'm taking you to the freshman tournament in Granville, Michigan." And I'm thinking, oh man, I hadn't even seen a real wrestling match. I just stayed in that wrestling room, go to practice, go home. I didn't even go to any real matches. I didn't know what it was about. I mean, like a real competition. So I said, "Coach, even me, I'm taking all the freshmen." He says, "Well, all the freshmen are going." Well, he took me to that freshman tournament. I took first place. Hey, Jason, but at that point, then wrestling is my sport. Mm-hmm. You couldn't have torn me away from it. I went to some summer clinics, and I just worked my butt off, and it was my sport. But that's how it happened.
So the Medal of Courage is given to someone who competed in the sport and has overcome what's termed insurmountable odds. Take us through I guess, the unfortunate incident that led you to, well, one, your physical gate today, for lack of a better term, but it was the Cliff Notes version was a skydiving accident, which when people first hear the story, it kind of uncorks some of their worst fears of it, even attempting it.
So how did it come about? What happened?
I mean, short version, your chutes didn't open and you landed.
Yeah.
And you're still here with
It's-
us today.
yeah, that's
That
the
right
short-
there is a miracle in itself.
It is. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's a miracle, and my friends and my family and my girlfriend and my parents and my brothers, they were there for me. They believed in me, and when you've got all those people pulling for you, that helps a lot. But it was a Memorial Day weekend, 1975.
So you were right out of college.
I
in your
just
20s?
finished my last wrestling season, so I was 21 years old. I was in my fourth year of college, and I was going to take the summer police academy, which was going to certify me as a police officer and give me enough credits to graduate. And then the plan was I was going to work local law enforcement, start out where I was doing an internship, and eventually get into federal law enforcement. So it was Memorial Day weekend. Yeah, finished wrestling a couple of months earlier. A lot of my friends were going to go camping that weekend, but I didn't go because the police department that I was doing the internship with wanted me to ride in the parade for Memorial Day. It was a little town, ride with the chief on Memorial Day, wave to the people. And so that's why I didn't go camping. And on the morning of my accident, I said to my girlfriend, her parents were going to come and visit school, and I said to her, before I see your family, I'm going to go out and get a couple jumps in. And it was on my first jump after 2-year layoff, because I had been jumping a couple years earlier. And it was on that first jump after the 2-year layoff when everything went wrong, and I just couldn't believe it was happening. When I hit the ground, I was fading in and out of consciousness. It's just everything flashed before me, before my eyes. Like I said, I couldn't believe it was happening, and it was just one big nightmare that went on for months and months and months, and I'm just very fortunate to get through it.
So you were an experienced jumper at this point. Now, not instructor level or anything, but this wasn't your first time going up.
Right. I had been up a handful of other times. I don't want to say that I was, I was inexperienced. I don't want to even say I was an experienced jumper. With 7 or 8 jumps, and back then, we didn't do any tandem jumping. Holding on to somebody, or someone holding on to you. You do it all by yourself. But when you think about it, that's kind of crazy. You've never, jumped out of a plane before, or even stood outside of a plane.
It's usually not high on people's list of things to do.
No. So when we started out and the instructor says, get out of the plane, it's like you want to say, why? This is a perfectly good plane, and then you remember that you're there for this sport. You want to do it because there's this attraction, and so I actually had you start out with with static line jumping. That means the parachute opens up automatically when you get to the end of the cord, so you don't have to worry about pulling a ripcord. But by the time I stopped jumping the first year, I was able to do some ripcord pulling jumps myself. And so I was progressing nicely, but then I worked a different job in the summertime, and I couldn't find a place to jump. And so anyway, it postponed my jumping for 2 years, and it was after 2 years that that I had this terrible accident. And if it weren't for the things that I learned on the wrestling mat, I really would not have made it through all those terrible days and nights of just suffering and not knowing what was going to happen in the future.
Wrestling, we talk about it as, it's tough to get into, but once you find it, once you fall in love with it, it can build that self-esteem where it's kind of tough to break through initially, and that resiliency. Are there situations that you can directly recall and be like, you know what? Okay, this hurts, this sucks right now, but you know what? I was in that match, or I went through this practice. How do you draw on a wrestling instinct, or how do you draw upon a wrestling experience to help you get through one of those tough days?
I can't say that I ever recalled any past, let's say, wrestling match or victory or defeat that I was able to think about,
Mm-hmm.
I do remember that there were several times when I reminded myself, I'm a wrestler, and I'm not going to give up, because we don't do that. So that's the best I can. That's the best I can give you. That most of it's subconscious, but consciously, when I did think about it, I reminded myself that I'm a wrestler, and that's all I had to do.
Perseverance. When you get out of the hospital, and it's obviously going to be a lifetime of things you're dealing with. You went from wanting to be in law enforcement, and you changed your focus, still wanting to make sure you were doing good, and you decided to study law. How much of that wrestling background and that wrestling wiring helped you go through not just the aftermath of the accident, but to pursue a law degree and become a trial lawyer?
Wrestling had a lot to do with it. I did not want to get through law school with a law degree and then become a lawyer. I wanted to get through law school and be the best student I could be. And when I went back to Grand Valley, I had to go for another year of school when I changed my major after I returned. And I looked so differently, Jason, that people who I had known didn't even recognize me on campus. And that's hard, it's real hard. Now, my best buddies, of course, a lot of them they graduated. They would recognize me anywhere, but people who I didn't know that well, but who I did know before, didn't know me afterwards. Anyway, I wanted to be good. I wanted to be the best. I got all A's that year that I returned to school, just to prove to myself that I could really work hard in school, because I never really had to before. And then when I went on to law school, like I say, I didn't want to just get out with a law degree. I wanted to be the best student I could be, and I worked very hard, and I did very well. Not to toot my own horn, but just to let you know that it paid off, the hard work, and then my first job out of law school was with a prosecutor's office outside of Detroit, and I wanted to be an assistant prosecutor, assistant DA, who was really good and a good trial lawyer, because that's very competitive, and it's a lot like wrestling. Now, I didn't say to myself, well, I want to be a trial lawyer because that's a lot like wrestling. But I realized afterwards that that's probably why I loved it the way I did, because it was so competitive and it was so much like wrestling. And then through the rest of my career in private practice, you can get by doing a lot of things as a lawyer, but if you really work hard, you can do a lot better. And wrestling made me want to do the best I could do.
Throughout the course of your life, you've got the business to take care of, but how much does wrestling play a role? How much do your old college teammates play a role? How prevalent is wrestling throughout the course of your life?
Well, I have to say that I developed a love-hate relationship with wrestling.
Sounds like every wrestling coach or every wrestler ever.
Really. And most of the hate came from the terrible weight loss practices, that we did back then. And if the coach knew everything you did, I mean, he wouldn't let you do it. But coaches they don't go home with you at night. And when I finished wrestling, I vowed that I would never, deliberately lose any weight again. And so, I found myself after leaving the hospital and then finding myself through law school and into life, I had no real calling to go back to wrestling. Mm-hmm. Now, my old teammates would get together. We'd get together every once in a while, or Coach Scott would have some kind of a get-together, and it was good to see everybody and to remember the old memories. But I had just as many hurtful memories, not only losing the weight, but thinking I could never go back and wrestle again, because there's always something in an old wrestler that says, well, maybe I could go back and wrestle freestyle for a couple of years or do some more Greco-Roman wrestling. And that hurt even thinking that I wouldn't have the chance to do that again. So I never really let myself be pulled back, in a significant way. And I honestly say that through winning this award or being given this award, it has helped me, think about wrestling more than I have in a long time, and I've really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the thoughts, I've enjoyed the people, the new people I've met, the more contact I've had with my old buddies, my wrestling buddies. So it's been a very positive experience.
I'm getting on the plane this morning in Minneapolis, and right in front of me is I see one guy's got the Hall of Fame mask on, and I noticed the Grand Valley logo on his sleeve, and I was like, aha, they're going to Honors Weekend. So, like you said, there was your time away from the sport. Well, guess what? You're back, and you may be away, but you never really leave. But I guess from that perspective, what's it like to walk through these halls for the first time and get a glimpse of, names you saw growing up, names you saw on the rest of the mat, names that you might have competed against? I mean, there's a lot of history. All you have to do is turn a page, and there's something that's gonna bring back a memory. What's it like to be here?
I haven't had a chance to spend much time here. I've just really been walking through a couple hallways, and I've already seen some names I've recognized. Just the images of wrestlers, just gets the old adrenaline pumping. Watching that videotape we watched, that was very moving for me. And I guess probably from what I've seen in here so far, I'm going to say it's been a very moving experience, and I expect that when I finish walking around, I'll be crying like a baby.
Well, that's just the tip of the iceberg with your story. We look forward to hearing more from you. We're glad you're here. Congratulations. Medal of Courage honoree Gary Chopp. It's good to see the mitten represented here at the Hall of Fame.
Thank you, Jason.